So hi guys, welcome to the Coding and Tools Building series for cybersecurity professionals with FixitGearWare Security. And today we are coming up with something very interesting in the Tools Building series, which we have commenced since we started the official coding channel on YouTube. So on that channel, we have over 16 videos that talks about coding in cybersecurity, where we build various tools using code concepts such as bash script. And also we introduce you to a few concepts on various programming languages such as C and C++, if we're not wrong, and other new concepts as well, where you can manipulate bash scripting, various commands to build a tool. So that channel was specifically dedicated, for tools building, because we want to make sure that whatever we teach you is very, very clear, and of course separating everything regarding the training we want to offer on our various cybersecurity related events and of course knowledge. So we try to separate that on our various YouTube channel, and hopefully that the purpose will be achieved by ensuring that if you're interested in learning about coding in cybersecurity, you are able to focus on the coding section channel. And if you're interested in learning about core cybersecurity such as red teaming and blue teaming and various tools, then you can focus on official cybersecurity channels. And finally, other channels such as web dev to build web applications, and the book series as well. So that's just a quick summary of our various channels. And of course, for our coding channel, we combined it to be a channel where we can teach you about coding and also building tools in cybersecurity. Okay, so these tools are not specifically for red teaming or blue teaming, but for now we're focusing on red teaming. And hopefully as time progresses and as we keep having more time on our side, we will try to expand other aspects of cybersecurity tools building using these various codes concept which we are going to be teaching you. So we would like to know if you're having a great week so far, and everything you have been planning or you've been trying to achieve, you've been able to achieve them. So if you have been successfully achieving your goals, then that's good, that's awesome. And we are patting you on your back to encourage you to keep going. Nothing is easy, especially when it comes to learning cybersecurity. It's not like it's difficult, but it's a bit complex, trying to have this knowledge and connecting it just like we do to teach various subject matters in our various official YouTube channel. So these are based on years of experience, both in the working industry and one-on-one experience with various applications, and of course, working with these various code structures, which we try to demonstrate. So now connecting those dots and putting it from a perspective of cybersecurity is one way we believe that we can build a very structured map, especially for those who are new into the profession or those who are trying to get into the profession, to have a very good, strong foundation on how they can proceed, to climb up the professional ladder in this industry. So with that being said, let's move on to the agenda of today and outline the various topics which we'll be covering as well. So on today's episode is the introduction to building the DNS Resolve tool series. This series comprises of 3 parts, where we would talk on the first part this week and today as well. So the first part comprises of building a DNS resolving tool that resolves a single domain. So when you provide a single domain to this tool, the tool should be able to resolve this domain and of course provide the DNS record for you, which if you're very familiar with offensive related tasks, you can be able to see which of these records that you can exploit in terms of vulnerabilities or subdomain takeovers and so on. So after we have completed this first segment of the 3-part series, the second segment we would be working on modifying the DNS record tool, which we are going to demonstrate today, to be able to resolve domains in a batch text file. So while we're trying to modify this, is that basically when you try to do your passive recon, of course, if you're in cybersecurity, you should understand what passive recon is all about. So when you're trying to do your passive recon, which involves domain name gathering and so on, you tend to have a lot of domains which you cannot be typing, just in single phrases to be analyzing the DNS record, right? So that is not a good practice from a place of automation. And that's why we would be introducing the batch text file DNS resolution on the second segment of this 3-part series, which we are commencing today. So on the third part, we would be releasing our first combo auto active recon tool with detailing. So that tool is going to comprise of this DNS resolution tool. And the goal is to guide you into automation. So automation is not basically looking for vulnerabilities, okay? People have various means of automation they perform. For us, we want to teach you the foundation, the very roots of exploiting a vulnerable target, okay? Not using tools out there like tools people build. You know, it's not a good thing because one, those tools can fail over time. That's a fact. And you can always have false positives where you find a vulnerability that exists, but actually it doesn't exist. So this tool will be telling you that there's a vulnerability. Then when you try to check, you discover there's no vulnerability. So that's false positive. And of course, the concept of false negative, whereby the tool will tell you there's no vulnerability because you're using the automation process. When you now formally dig in manually, you discover that there is a vulnerability in that specific target you're exploiting. So that's what we call false negative. So the false negative tells you there's nothing, but when you check manually, you discover there's something there. So the concept of our automation process is not to give you tools to find vulnerabilities with automation tools. Of course, we will get to that stage when it comes to our tools building, but our main focus is to teach you various automation tools and how you can plan these automation tools to do certain things for you. Then you can now manually dig for vulnerabilities yourself. And trust me, this is the best way you can learn cybersecurity in terms of training, in terms of writing tools, and other aspects of the industry. Okay, and that is why FixitGearWare Security is taking this initiative and trying our best to make sure we put you through. Then also today we'll be giving a brief definition of DNS resolution and DNS record. So the important part of defining these two key points or words in DNS resolving is because these are the two key words that are associated with getting DNS info of a specific target or domain name. So if you don't understand the basic foundation and definition of this concept, you are just using a tool, or you're just writing a tool without understanding what each segment of the code performs or what's the function of each segment of the code. So that's why we're also taking this initiative first today to define these two key words for you to have a broad spectrum in terms of what DNS information is all about. And you can only appreciate the information about DNS when you have understand these two keywords, which is DNS resolution and DNS record. So having said all this, let's get started with defining these two terms. So what is DNS resolution? From our definition here, it is the process of translating human readable data, such as domain name, into machine readable data, such as IP address, to enable two or more communicating computers interact and locate each other over the internet. Going back to this definition, when we talk about human readable data such as domain names, for example, we have tons of domain names out there, such as FixitGearWare.com, BOA.com, Bank of America, we have Facebook.com, we have X.com, we have BlueSky.com, numerous domains. Now you can see while I'm pronouncing these domain names, I'm able to remember them offhand or by heart because they are very easy to remember, right? And these are known as domain names, okay? But if I want the computer to communicate with these domain names, the computer itself would not be able to, understand FixitGearWare.com because in its record, it deals with binary or numbers, okay? And these numbers are in zeros and ones, okay? So for me to let's say I have my computer on my desk and I want to communicate with a server where FixitGearWare.com is, okay? for my computer to be able to communicate with that server where FixitGearWare.com is, the domain name FixitGearWare.com would first be resolved as an IP address. So when that has been done, or when the domain name has now been officially resolved as an IP address, my computer will use its own IP to try to communicate with the IP address associated with FixitGearWare.com. So once it tries to communicate by sending packets known as ICMP requests and all the interaction that goes under the hood, it's able to have a successful communication because both computers understand these various communicating patterns using what we call IP address. So this is the concept of DNS resolution. So once you try to access FixitGearWare.com, X.com, or Facebook.com, those are domain names that you can easily remember. But if I try to ask you what is the IP address of FixitGearWare.com or Facebook or X, or let me say I ask you the IP address of the first 100 domain names I mentioned, you cannot remember them. But I promise you, if I ask you to mention 500 domains off heart without remembering their IP address, without even reading anything on Google, you'll be able to remember them because you know them by name. For example, let's say we're talking about USA, USA.gov. Let's say we are talking about Australia, Australia.com. Let's say we are talking about Japan, Japan.com. Or let's say we're talking about tourist, you can say tourism.com. So these are very easy to remember because they are represented in data that are human readable. So the humans doesn't need to put more effort to, remember or cram these names. But if you have to deal with IP address and try to associate IP address to the human to be able to remember those numbers, at some point, I think if you mention the first two or first three, the rest you are not able to remember because you're confused, right? And that's where DNS resolution comes in. So DNS resolution takes this domain name when you put them into your browser, resolves it into an IP address so that these two computers that are interacting, in this case, the client, your browser, sitting on your personal computer, and the server where this domain name is hosted, are able to communicate without any hiccup or any difficulties. And that is DNS resolution. Now, what is DNS record? When we talk about DNS record, record is like information that is associated with someone. For example, let's say you're talking about me, Ben. What are the records you can use to identify me? You have my name, you have my date of birth, you have my personal email, you have my phone number, you have my social security number or some special character numbers that are used to identify me by the government, or they're known as government assigned IDs, and other associated information. So let's say I try to get to my government and they need me to provide my name to retrieve my information. When I give them my name, let's say I give them my surname, because surnames are unique, but they are also universal because a lot of people comes under that surname, which can be cousins, nephews, niece, and so on, right? So when they put in that surname, every names associated with that surname would come out, right? So that's a broad spectrum. Now, we have defined DNS resolution, which is resolving a domain name into an IP address. Now, let's say I provide a unique identification number. It can be my social security number that has been assigned to me by the government. Now, that social security number is now seen as an IP address, okay? That is able to communicate with another computer, right? So if that social security number is inserted into the database, no two persons has the same social security number, such as no two computers have the same IP address. So once that social security number has been inserted into the database to retrieve information associated with me, the government official will now be able to see my own name in full characters, which is my surname, my middle name, my first name, and other associated names assigned to me by my family. Then the government official will also be able to see where I come from, my state of origin, other county, local government, or whatever it is that I'm associated with. Then my phone number will also be retrieved. If there are other sensitive records and data associated with me, which is not, visible to the public internet or public persons, but can be viewed by this government official, these records will also be pulled out. And those records are uniquely associated with me and not with anyone else. And this can now be used to explain a DNS record. So a DNS record in this case is a series of data entry in the DNS known as domain name system that provides all information about the specific domain whose record are looked up. These records are known as record types and they are associated with that specific domain name. So like we said, no two persons have the same social security number. So once you enter that unique social security number or government identification numbers that is associated with me, that ID, in this case we are referencing as an IP address, will pull every information that has been tied to that data entry, which is the social security number. So when you're trying to do a DNS record lookup, when you provide the domain name, first of all, those are human readable data. The DNS, first of all, resolve that domain name into an IP address to be able to communicate with the computer that is associated with that domain name. Now, once it's able to communicate with that computer, any record that has been tied to that IP address, such as MX record, A records, canonical names known as C names, and other forms of records, will be pulled out in our web browser and, of course, presented to us to view. And that's how the DNS record tool works, or DNS resolution tool works. Okay. So these two concepts, we are going to be demonstrating it right away while we try to build this tool and tell you which part of the tool does the DNS resolution and which part of the tool pulls the DNS record. So with that being said, let's move on to building the first segment of the three-part series of the DNS record tool. So over here, we still have our ping spy tool. Let's just create a folder. Let's call it DNS record tool. Okay, so we go into that directory. We create a new file. So let's call this domain resolve.py. Okay, so basically what domain resolve does is to resolve the domain name into an IP address, which enables this IP address to be able to be communicated with and, of course, interact with our own computer, which also has an IP address. So let's make a comment here. Let's say this tool, this file contains the code for resolving domain names into IP addresses. You see, it picks up our tool information. This is to enable the DNS record tool to fetch and display DNS record. So we quick fix, add to our workspace settings, and we Ctrl S. Okay, now let's define a function. Okay, but before we define a function, let's import a Python package known as socket. Okay, good. Now what does this do? This is a Python package that is used to get information about a specific domain. Okay, so you can see more information about this. It contains a module, okay, that provides socket operations. There are quite numerous informations we can use, and as you can see here, we have these informations here. Okay, this is a special plugin I installed. So if I'm trying to code, I'm trying to use certain functions or certain modules, I always use this plugin to get information. I don't need to go to the internet or ChatGPT to get this information. I will just hover and look out for whatever of the functions of that module or package that I want to use, and I'll use it in my tool. Okay, so it's very simple. Later on, not today, I would talk about this plugin and, of course, tell you how to install it on VS Code. So next, let's now create a function. So we call it by def. So we say domain underscore to IP. Okay. Okay. So this is a function. We are trying to resolve the domain to an IP. Then we call the object, we call it domain. Sorry, we call the variable name domain. Okay. So this variable name is the variable name that will be supplied by the user when they're trying to get a domain resolution into an IP address. Okay. Now we'll now say, let's call a variable name called IP. So this IP variable name is going to hold information that has to do with the socket module. And we're going to use in this socket a function known as get host by name. So map a host to its IP number. You can see all I explained here. Whatever of the function you're using is going to be explained. So we're using this function by calling this module to be able to get, this domain that will be supplied by the user or by the person using this tool and resolve it into an IP address. Okay. This is the first part, also known as DNS resolution, which we have described. So this part is known as DNS resolution, which we have defined. Okay, good. Now, so we say socket, okay, dot get host. Then of course the variable name, not object, sorry. The variable name known as domain, okay, will be called. So this IP variable name should hold on to this socket.getHost by name, which calls the variable name domain that is supplied by the user and resolve it, okay, into an IP address. Okay. Now we want to have information that this has been resolved. Okay. So we can say print, okay, and of course we have to format it. Sorry about that. So now back to what we're saying. So here we have set socket.getHost by name, then the domain, the variable name domain, right? Now we want to print the result. We say print, okay, F. So basically we want to format the data, right? Okay. Then we'll say, let's make it the domain, let's make it sterix. Okay. IP address, okay, for domain, okay, this domain that is supplied by the user is this IP, which is this, okay. Then we come down. So now let's try this. Let's introduce try here. Let's say this should be a try, okay. So you should be aware of how to use exception, right? So what we are trying to say here is that this should be tried. IP, this variable name IP should try this package or module and call the function get host name and print this, okay, sorry, and get the domain name supplied by the user. Then print the result that the IP address of the domain, mention the domain and of course the IP. So in trying to resolve this, it's going to say that the domain that was supplied, which is this is the IP address, okay. Now, let's say there is an error whereby the domain cannot be resolved. We now call except .gai error, okay, as exception. Okay, we can call it as E. Then we say print this. Okay. So here we say print error resolving the domain and of course the exception, okay. So if you look at this code right now, okay, we go back again and explain. Here we import the module called socket, okay, and this module has a lot of functions which we can use to perform the specific actions we want when we are building our DNS record tool. Now we defined a function. So this function, we called it domain to IP. So this function is responsible for resolving the domain supplied by the user into an IP. And the domain that is being supplied by the user has a variable name called domain. Okay. Now we set IP, which of course the variable name, which is going to hold the action that is going to be carried out by the socket. Okay. Using the socket module and the function of the socket module known as getHost by name, and calls the variable name domain. Okay. So once this action is carried out, this variable name IP should hold this action. Now, if this is successful, it should print out this and say the IP address for the domain, which is this domain name that was supplied by the user, has this IP address. Okay. So we try to use exception to do this. So to try this action, then if this action is not successful, there should be an exception. And the exception here, we try to call this class called GAIE error, so known as GAI error. It's a special class to call using the socket module. Okay, and we say that this should handle this as an exception and print the error of the information. So it can be error resolving the domain, and in this case we want this to print the exception. What is the exception here? What's the error? Okay, we can also remove this and just end it here. Okay, and we can also remove this and just end it here. Okay, the reason why we're doing this is that in the subsequent file we're going to build, we're also going to introduce another exception. Then we call these two functions in the main function.py file. Okay, so now let's create another file known as DNS info. Okay, so this is the file that is responsible for holding the information about the DNS records associated with the domain which we are going to be querying or probing. Okay, so we call this new file DNS info, okay, .py. Okay, now to run this DNS info to get the DNS tool to perform the DNS record lookup, we have to install a Python package known as DNS info. So we say pip install, okay, DNS Python, and we hit enter. So says don't show again. Good. So we already have this installed. That's why we're having this information here that this has been, satisfied. But for you to be able to use this tool, you need to install this package or this module. Okay, so we clear this. Now we make a comment. This part of the tool is responsible for DNS record information retrieval. Okay, it uses the Python package DNS Python to fetch DNS record. Now, to be able to use this, okay, we have to use import, okay, import DNS.resolver. Okay, so what does this do is that basically this DNS resolver, it's a special function, okay, that is imported from the DNS Python package. Okay, so this DNS resolver is what is going to be able to resolve this IP address, okay, record information, and publish the various DNS record we are querying. Okay, so we have various DNS records such as the A records, the quadruple A records, the MX record, the name server record, the PTR, the SRV, and so on, right? So this is the tool, this is the function using the DNS Python package that is responsible for resolving those information. Okay, so now that we have imported that, the next thing we want to do is that we want to define a function. So this function, we call this function definition. We call it DNS_info, and we call this to call the same variable name domain. So why do we do that? Is that it's very simple. We go back here. This variable name domain is what we are dealing with, and this domain is what resolves into an IP and print the record as well. So we also want this same domain which the user will supply to be able to be used to retrieve the DNS information about that specific domain. That's why we're calling the same variable name here. Okay, then now we have to declare which of the records, which of the record information we want to look out for or we want to look up on that specific domain. So this is where we now call records info. Okay, record_info. then we declare an array of information or data. Okay, so this array of information or data is going to hold these various records. Okay, so we have the A, okay, we have the SO, we have the PTR, we have the CAA, what else? We have the CAA, we have the NAPTR, and what else? Let's see, we have we have DNS record. Sorry about that. We have DNS key and DNS record. Okay, so we can call this record. So we put them here. Okay, so now we have declared the arrays that contains our record. Now we want to iterate this domain for each of this record, right? Because at the end of the day, we are trying to get each record that is associated with this domain. This is where the for loop comes in. So we say for, record info in records, record underscore infos. Okay, remove this. This auto coding is like making issues tough. So for record infos, in record info, we say try. Okay, so we want to use exception again. Now, this is where it comes tricky. You see, as we keep writing our code, it keeps picking up possible concept. Okay, this is Copilot. We have a Copilot premium here. So this is Copilot doing this. So it picks this info to tell us how we can complete our code. So just ignore it. Just follow the steps of what we are doing. Okay. Sorry about that. This is why we have error in the code. So it keeps doing this, picking this code. So just follow our concept, ignore whatever is on the screen. So here we are saying try this concept after iterating across this record infos. So what do we want to try? We want to try and get a response, okay, using this DNS resolver. We now say a response, okay, then we'll say DNS dot resolver dot resolve. Okay, then we specify what information do we want to resolve. So we want to resolve that domain, okay, for each of the record info in record infos. Okay, so we say domain in record info. So okay, so we are trying to say that this variable name called response, okay, should use the DNS resolver function in the DNS Python package and use this auto function known as resolve to resolve the domain name, which has been resolved into an IP address from this first file, and get a record info across record infos. So for here, it's going to say for this IP address, the record info A in this record infos is this. Then goes again and say for this IP address, the record info for this second record infos, the quadruple A is this. So that's the essence of, using the response to perform this action. So once we are able to perform this action, okay, we can now come down and say, we want to print the response, right? So we can say print bracket F, okay, we say asterisk, okay, and we say the record info, which is this specific record info. Let's say for the first one is going to be A, then for the domain which has been resolved into an IP, right, to be this. So we can just use tab to complete the code. So basically we're saying here, okay, that this variable name should perform this act. Then for this iteration, that it should print this, okay. So when it prints this, it will display it right now. But if it prints this, how are we going to curate these for each of these data, not to complicate everything as one lump sum, which would not be human readable. That is where we now introduce another for loop. So we can say for, we can now say any data, we can say responses in response. Okay, then print this to text. Okay, so basically what we are trying to say is that it should print the response. Okay, we can say put this one here. So for each of these responses in response, which is performing this lookup, it should print the responses, okay, to text. Okay, so this makes it very easy. Response, huh? So this makes it very easy for us to now curate this information as a single data. So for A records, we can refer it to as a single data. For CNAME, we can refer it as a single data. For MX, we can refer it to as a single data. Okay. So once that is done, the next thing we want to do is that we want to introduce an exception. Okay. So this exception is responsible for catching the error in the file. So let's say, during the resolution. So let's say there was no success, right? This exception would be able to, print the information that there was no success. So we can now say except. Okay. Now this except has three class it uses. It uses the no answer class, the resolver.nx domain class, and resolver timeout class. So we can just say tab. So what we're trying to say is that if this, get this, if this get this, and if this get this, then it should, print the error message and tell us what happened. So we can now say print. We can now say print. Okay, we say print. Okay, F. There was an error. Retrieving. Then this record info, because we have assigned this variable name to be, for each of this record info to be a representation of this record infos, right? So then we now say the record info record for the domain. So we can say record underscore info records for the domain. Of course, we have to put curly braces and we say domain, and we put this. Okay, so we can end this here, and we end it with a curly bracket, sorry, with a bracket. Okay, now so we are now saying except this and this and this is possible, then it should print out the error. Okay, now we want to handle this overall concept as an exception, E. So we can call except. Okay, we now call exception as E. Okay, good. Then we print there's an unexpected error that has occurred. Okay, so we can say print there has been an unexpected error. Okay, like Copilot is always having this auto completion. Okay, good. Now let's well, we have an error here. Okay, where are we having this error? Where is our error coming from? Response. Okay, for response sys response. Okay, let's see. Print this. Okay, good. So we put this one. Yeah, this is one of the difficulties with Python. You have to get your code formatting correctly. Okay, sorry, Copilot was making a mess here. So basically, let's now explain this code again. So here we define a function called DNS info. So this function is responsible for getting the DNS information using the various DNS records that is known. So for these informations, we want to get every of these informations when we're using this DNS tool. So we declare them as an array of data, okay? But we cannot just run this tool to just push out this entire data. So we now use the for loop to, iterate across this record infos, okay? So here we declared a for loop, and we declared a variable name known as record info, a single information across all those infos. Then we use exception to try action. So we can use if and else statement, but it doesn't make sense, right? That was just going to be a single concept of the code without, giving rooms or space to catch errors when they occur, or, when something happens, okay? So we now use the try to use and conduct this action here. So here, this action here is response, which is a variable name we declared. So this response uses the DNS Resolver module in the DNS Python package, then calls the function resolve to resolve the domain which has been here. Let's see, which has been supplied here and resolved into an IP address here, and call this variable name record info. So single record A record, then print out the information. Okay, so it prints out the record info, the A information, the records for this. Then we want to get the response in such a way that for each of this record info, we want it to be very clear and concise, that is readable by every human, right? We now say for responses in response, print the responses to text. So here we are trying to say that for this, in this response, right, print every of the responses to text. Okay, so it's going to print for each of these. So when it goes for A, it's going to print the A record and print this information, okay, which has to do with the record info from this record infos, right? Then the domain that has it, then of course the record information, okay, which is the response. Then it's going to do for this. Then we now came here and introduced exception. So basically this exception here is trying to use the class no answer. So this no answer does not contain an answer to the question if there are no answer to, using the DNS resolver to resolve any of the domain which we have supplied to get the record info. Then this query means that the name server doesn't exist. So it's another of the class in the DNS resolver. Okay. Then we have DNS resolver timeout. So basically timeout is if after a while there is no response trying to resolve this domain which has been resolved into an IP address to get the DNS information, then it should throw this exception that there was an error retrieving the record info. Okay. Then of course provide the domain that has the error. Now we have narrowed down this code in such a way that it's very easy for us, because while we're making this concept like this is because at the end of the day, when we are going to modify this code to accept files, in this case when you have thousands of files where informations about a target you're trying to hack is, then we want these to be able to skip certain domains when it times out. After a while it doesn't get information, it should skip them, okay, and move on to the next domain. Then we have a general exception here. So this general exception here is a general exception which has to do with unexpected error. It can be error due to IO devices and so on. So that's why we are now defining this general exception here. Now we have created these two files. Let's now create the main function file that calls these two functions in these separate files, and of course run the tool and asks us to present the domain we want to try and get the DNS information. So now we come over here, still on our directory, and we create a new file. We call it main.py. Okay, now this main.py, this file contains the code for the code function for DNS info and domain name IP. So this one has to call for domain to IP, then DNS info to get the DNS information, right? So we call def, okay, main, and we enter. Now remember, we said the user has to provide a domain, right? Now you see there is this thing Copilot is doing for us, trying to tell us what to import. We are getting there. We are not yet ready to do that, okay? So we come down here, we enter, okay? Then we say the domain. Remember, the user has to supply a domain, right? So we call the variable name again, domain, and we say input, okay? So why are we using input? Is because we want the user to enter the domain, right? So we can say enter the domain name here, okay? Okay, good. Now, it's very important to put a special function called .strip, okay? Now, why we put in .strip here is that, let's say the user want to type the domain FixitGearWare.com, right? And they just type, tap, and type. So that's a white space, right? It can cause an error for the tool not to function. So that's why we're putting the strip. So it's going to strip any white spaces or empty spaces and just go straight to the domain that was supplied by the user. That's the essence of the strip, okay? Then after we're done, okay, we now say print, okay, sorry about that, F, okay, then you say the domain, okay, record for domain. So IP address is, then we hit enter. So basically we want to create a header. We can put this in a new line, not to create confusion. So basically we want to print information to know what has been done for each of the function that was called, right? Okay. Now we go back to our first file, which is what? Domain resolve. Now this is called domain_resolve, right? That's the name of the file. And we have a function called domain to IP. So in our main.py file, we'll say from domain_resolve, import the function domain to IP, okay? So basically we are calling this function, basically from this file, we are calling this function to come into the main function and execute the action which that code in the domain_resolve file has, okay? So now we come here and say domain to IP, okay? Then we call domain, okay? Remember this domain to IP, go back again. Remember, we have a domain, right? And we try to resolve by using get host name, okay? And print the IP address associated with that domain and the IP, right? So this is what we are doing here in the main function. We are trying to say that, you know, go to this, print this information as the heading information and go to this function and run this domain which has been supplied by the user. So pick this function and execute this. And the next thing we want to do is to print the information, right? Which has already been declared here. So it will not print this information. So if there's an exception, there's an error using the guy error, it's going to say there's an error like this, right? So this has been handled. We don't need to call it here again to print. Okay. Now we declare another print function. Let's say we say print. Okay. in a new line. Okay, let's say, sorry about that. So the DNS record information. Okay, so now this is the DNS record for this domain to IP address is this, right? So we're not talking about the DNS record information for the domain. Okay, we can ignore this or we can leave it. Okay, now there's a two reason why we are trying to put this here. It's because when we introduce the other concept of pulling from a text file, it's going to curate a lot of results. So we want to make sure that when you start reading those results, you can be able to differentiate the different domain which the record has been displayed to you. And of course, from there, pick out the necessary informations that you want to pick out and know which domain has it. That's why we're bringing out this here again. Okay. So you can say the entire DNS record information for the domain, right? Is, then we can come here. We say, we go back again to the other file, DNS info, right? So we say from DNS info file, okay, import this class, import this function, DNS info, okay? So we'll say from DNS info, import DNS info, okay? Because we named the file as DNS info, right? So once we have imported the function, the next thing we want to do is we call the function here, DNS info. And of course, we're still dealing with the same variable name, which is the domain supplied by the user of this tool, right? And we'll say domain. And we close bracket, okay? And we hit enter. Now we have done everything necessary. The next thing we want to do is that we just call the main function if, of course, name, then call main, right? Then we come and enter and we'll say main. Sorry, and we hit enter. Main. Okay. Good. Now the entire code is completed. Okay. Now let's explain this main function or the main.py file to you. So here we are importing these two functions from the package or file that is associated with them. So this one is responsible for resolving domain names to IP address, and this one is responsible for fetching the DNS record associated with that IP address, which, okay, belongs to the domain name provided by the user of the tool. Okay, so we can do this and we'll say Ctrl S. Now let's run this. Okay, let's run this. Where is our issue coming from? Okay, so we go back to domain, print this. Okay, then print this error, right? Accept this, then we go to DNS info. Okay, Ctrl S, Ctrl S, Ctrl S. Let's close this. Okay, let's run this again. Okay, so why is our tool not working? Okay, let's remove this comment. Sometimes this can happen. There's somewhere we missed some info. DNS Resolver is here. Socket has been imported. Okay, let's run the tool again. Let's try something. Let's say print. Okay. In a new line to running now. Right. Okay. Okay, let's see. Let's just introduce something. Okay, let's see what's gonna happen. Let's run this. Still the same thing. There is an error somewhere in our code. Okay, let's go back. Try exception as E. Accept this timeout. Accept this. Try exception as E. Try accept. Okay, let's okay, as E. Okay. Let's see. Try exception as E. See. Okay. Let's see. Try exception as E. Let's see. Accept. Okay. Error. No need. Let's just use this one. Okay. Then we go back here. Try exception as E. Accept as E. There is an error. Exception as E. Okay. Let's run again and see. Still the same thing. There must be something that is failing out too. Okay, let me see. Okay, let's see why. Okay, let's debug the code. Okay, we'll debug the code and see where the error is coming from. Just give us a while. Okay. Okay, so we'll debug the code and find where our mistakes are. And we would resolve this. Okay. Okay. Okay, just hold on. Let's check. We are debugging right now with the tool. Let's see where the error is from. So okay, so okay, good. Okay, let's see where our issues SE. Yep, correct. Okay. Let's see. Right, correct. Okay. Our data to text is correct. DNS no answer. Annex domain. SE. Okay. Records for domain. So this is where our issue was. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see if we can run this again. Still have an error. Okay. We still have an error. Let's see our main.py. Okay. Domain to IP. Okay. Strip. Domain to IP domain. Print this. DNS info domain. Yep. So where is the mistake coming from? Okay, let's see where our mistake is coming from. So we debug this tool. Let's see where our mistake is coming from. Okay. Okay. Let's see where our mistake is coming from. Yeah. So our mistake is coming from here. Okay. So we debug this tool and yeah, this is where our mistake is coming from our main function. So this was correct. This was correct. And our main function was the issue. So let's say we put our domain FixitGearWare.com and we hit enter. Boom. Now you can see it's, putting all the answers and response here. You can see trying to run it now. Enter the domain. We enter the domain record to IP address is this. The IP address for FixitGearWare.com is this. Okay, then the entire DNS record information is this, AAA records. So let's put this in a new line. Let's go back here. Print this response. Yep. Let's put this in a new line. Okay. So we don't make a mess of the information. So we can go back and we can clear this. Okay. So we go back to the main and we run it again. So we say FixitGearWare.com and we hit enter. Yep. So you can see for the MX record, for the AAA record, for CNAME, there was no CNAME. So there was an error retrieving this. So let's go back again to put a new line. Yep, this should be a new line. We just want to make the code clean to the human eye. Let's go, this guy is correct. Let's put a new line here as well. And let's put a new line here as well. Yep. So we go back again. Play this. So let's run it again. FixitGearWare.com. So we can see this is it. So here it tells us the domain record to IP address is the IP address for FixitGearWare.com is this guy. The entire DNS record information, A records for FixitGearWare.com is this. The AAA record is this. So the entire, where are you? Okay. We can put a new line here. Can put a new line here. Let's run it. So let's run it again. So FixitGearWare.com. So yep. So we have a new line. Yep. So the entire DNS information, the A record is this, the AAA record is this, and so on. So let's go back and make this to be very uniform, so we don't have quite a mess. So wherever we have a print, let's put a new line. Here we have a print. So we put a new line. Where else do we have a print? Here, all done. So we Ctrl S. We come back here, we have a print. So let's put, this guy is okay. This guy is okay. This guy is okay. This guy is okay. Main function. Okay. Never mind. So we go back again. We run. Oh no. So we go back again. We run the tool and let's run again. So we say FixitGearWare.com. Okay. Good. So yep. So it should be clean now. Good. Yeah. So we have, so for the A records, is this guy. For the AA record, is this guy. For the ones that the CNAME, there was no CNAME, so that's why we're having this. The MX record, it printed it out. The NS record, which is the name server, it printed it out. The TXT record, it printed it out. The SO records, it printed it out. So these are very interesting. Okay, so we can use this to get information about the target mode. And the other records, SRV, PTR, CAA, NAPTR, they do not exist. And the DNS key, of course, these are public keys. And that's it. Okay. So now, let's say we run the tool again. You see the essence of this guy here. Okay. So let's say we say tap, 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 and we put FixitGearWare.com. Okay. We're still going to get the record. Okay. So this strips the white spaces and of course, print out the record information. You can see that even the white spaces are here, it still strips it out and run the code, right? So it doesn't matter. So why is this important is that when we start introducing you to pull from a text file containing a lot of domain names, right? We want these white spaces to be cleared out and of course, be able to run this tool efficiently without errors. Now let's throw a new important issue we faced when we were trying to build this tool. Okay, there was this issue we faced when we're trying to build this tool. Okay, so we run this and we say HTTPS. Okay, we say www.fixitgearware.com. I want you to see something. See, there was an error. No information was retrieved, right? And we came again. We tried something else. We say www.fixitgearware.com. You can see the information we retrieved is different from the one we retrieved by just providing this guy alone. You can see certain informations are missing, such as the you can see certain informations are missing, such as the DNS key record. Okay, you can see the DNS key record is missing, right? So this is where we now came up with another concept. Okay, so this concept is to strip anything that has to do with let's say HTTPS, HTTP, www, to strip any of those things or any forward slash and just pick only the domain name and resolve. Now, why is this important? Is that when you start doing your passive recon using Shoulder and FOFA, Google, any other concept you use in making your recon, right? You gather a whole lot of domains. And these domains are not just one, two, there can be thousands, right? So you don't want to start doing filtering, doing this, filter this, get out the, unwanted, parameters there, right? So we came up with this idea of, after this strip has been done, an additional strip should be conducted, okay? So what does this additional strip does is very simple. It strips off any HTTPS / HTTP www in that domain provided and just pick only the domain name and resolve it. So we came here again, we say domain, okay, equals to, sorry about that, equals to, then we say domain dot replace. Okay, we can still introduce another concept which is called domain dot lower in case you type in capital letters, right? Then we say replace this. This concept came out when we were trying to use this domain dot replace. Okay, and Copilot suggested that we should, remove all those things, right? Then we did tab. Okay. Now, but what if there's a single forward slash? So using the same ideology and concept, right? We came again, we said dot replace. Then this pop up. So this is a forward slash. Okay. So even if there is a forward slash, a single forward slash, www, HTTPS, HTTP, or let's say there is even only www alone. Okay. It should replace it. Okay. So now, having done this, let's say we run this again. Let's now show you this. We run this too, and we say HTTPS www.fixitgearware.com. It's still gonna strip it. Enter the domain fixitgearware.com. Oh, we made a mistake. So here you can see we specified 4 instead of 3, and it's not among what we specified here to, strip. So we can also put this one. Okay. We can also put for this one in case there's any mistake. Okay. Let's run it again. We're going to still use this domain. You're going to see what's going to happen. Okay. So we come back here. We run the tool and we paste this, right? Let's see. HTTPS. Okay. Let's clear this. So we run the tool. We say HTTPS. Okay. www.fixitgearware.com. Good. So you can see right now, it's able to strip the www IP, subdomain away from the full domain, and of course resolve this, right? So let's say let's remove this. Sorry, there was a mistake. We remove this. Okay. Let's clear save. Now let's say we go back and we say HTTPS www.fixitgearware.com. Sorry, we run the tool again. We say HTTPS www.fixitgearware.com, and we hit enter. Now it tells us IDNA codec failed. Okay, so by right, this is not how a domain is represented, right? So we can clear this. Okay, we remove that. Where is it? Okay, we remove this. Okay, we run the tool again. So we say HTTP. We run the tool again and we say HTTPS www.fixitgearware.com. Good. So you can see it's working. Okay, it's able to resolve this. And if we come back here and we clear this and we run it again and we say HTTP www.fixitgearware.com, it's still going to strip it off and run the subdomain. And if we come back here again, let's clear. For some reasons, I don't know why my keyboard is misbehaving. If we come back here again and we run this, and we say just www.fixitgearware.com, and it's still going to strip it and get all the informations we need. Okay, so we can try this with different domains. We can run it. We can say x.com, which is also known as Twitter. You can see it's still retrieving information. So we can look into this and see what we can exploit. These are all subdomains. See this guys here. So this name server records, if you're very, very familiar, you should know how you can get, some exploit in it. I'm trying to look for the CNAMEs. The CNAMEs are very important because if you're very familiar with subdomain takeovers, you can be able to, exploit this vulnerability as well. And here is the IP address. Of course, we know that they might have they definitely have a strong firewall. So trying to run Nmap on this IP address might not give a promising result. It might lead you to a honeypot or something like that. So yeah, you can see these are other information. So these are basically MX record, which is the mail exchange server record. And here we have the name server record. So you can try and look up these name servers and see what you can pull out from there if you're good at, pen testing name servers and so on. And here you can see there was an error trying to retrieve the TXT record. Okay, then gave us a few of the informations that we need as well. So we can also come here and we can clear this. And we can run and we can use facebook.com and we hit enter. You can see all this record are retrieved and it doesn't waste time. So there's no need of you going to the public internet looking for web browser tools to, upload files and get these informations and trying to see what you can get out of it. So with this tool we created, you can be able to provide a single domain. So we are not going to upload this repository because one, we are trying to modify this tool to be able to accept a batch text file from the user and iterate across this various domains in that batch text file, resolve them into IP address, and from there, print out these DNS information, for the user in the terminal. Then secondly, we want to integrate this concept into another advanced tool we want to unveil shortly. So this would speed up your recon process, especially when it comes to active recon. The idea of this tool we are drafting, and it's going to be open source. We are still putting the ideas in such a way that it's going to be very perfect. Okay. So automation is just about to get interesting with our tools we are going to unveil. And we want to connect the dots in such a way that you just have to relax and just wait. So within the, speed of light, the recon tool will be able to perform everything that it needs to do for you. And this information, you can now extract them and study them. This is where you also have to be very sensitive in terms of how to look out for informations. When you spot informations that are very, very exploitable in a file, in a specific target you're trying to target. So this will print out all these DNS records and other things we are going to integrate into that tool. You can be able to use as part of your arsenals you have in your active recon process. So please be patient with us. And sorry, this video dragged too long because we are trying to debug. So this is one of the reasons why we said we do not want to be doing a live coding section when it comes to building tools, except if we specifically introduce that as a course or as a training, because debugging process takes time. You will see your code, there is no error, but there is an error. Like the code says it's perfect, but while you're still running the code, it's not running, right? So this is exactly what we just faced right now. Everything was okay until a debugging tool told us like, oh, sorry, you were supposed to put exception E here. So just one E wasn't properly catched. And that's why the tool was running, but wasn't displaying wasn't actually performing the actions which we want the tool to perform. So take your time, watch this video. It's very interesting. And our next episode, we're going to introduce the concept of, modifying this code. We won't code afresh. We'll just introduce the lines where we want to introduce this to open a text file, read each lines of the text file, resolve the domain, then go back, pull out, and of course, get the DNS record and so on. So by the time we're done with this, we're now going to integrate that concept into our tool, which we are going to unveil. Okay, so that's it. And yeah, that's it. So with that, we have come to an end of this coding series and building tools in cybersecurity with FixitGearWare Security. And we hope you have learned something very interesting today. Please keep practicing, and coding is not difficult. Yes, it can be frustrating, but trust me, it's not difficult. It's just manipulation of concept out there that has already existed, or that, that has been created, which includes calling classes, calling functions. Most importantly, knowing what you're writing codes for. So like, we know what we're writing, we know the concept of how this is being carried out. That gives us an idea of the various modules we need to import and the various functions and classes of those modules we have to call to be able to execute our tool efficiently without having any errors. Okay, so with that, we have come to an end of this week's episode, and we want to say thank you for watching. And for those who are also subscribing to our main channels, we are seeing the numbers. Thank you, we appreciate you. And what else? See you next week on our book review series with FixitGearWare Security, and bye for now.